All right, everyone. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jason Levine, and for today's video masterclass here on Adobe Live, I'm going to be talking about something that gets asked quite a lot, very often, and probably among some of the many videos that I've done, I've talked about this in great detail, but it's not something that we talk about every day because it's fairly nerdy and fairly specific. But it's basically the concept of editing formats versus delivery formats. Or more importantly, what do we do with all these different formats that we shoot with or have the access to for export or whatever? I get asked all the time, well, what's the best format for uploading to YouTube? Or what's the chosen format if I'm going to to have my film premiered in a cinema or at Sundance? Or, are MP4s the ideal format for editing or for delivery? Or what about H.265, right? What about HEVC, et cetera, et cetera? So we're going to cover all those things. Along the way, talk about using Adobe Prelude if you want to transcode and convert all of your media, and I'll talk to you about why you would do that. And then also when and how to create proxy files. So this is the ability to allow you to create smaller, lightweight versions of your media, which you can edit with to give you really the best performance in Premiere. And then with a single click, you can automatically relink to the native full resolution media and export and do your thing. So we're going to cover all that stuff. We got, approximately 50 some minutes to do that. So as always, lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining me here in the chat. Got Alexander, got Steve and Jack, Michelle, very nice to see you. All right, Dola and Hamad Azamalek, very nice to see you. All right. So why don't we go ahead and we'll kick it into gear here. And by the way, just want to remind all of you that are watching on YouTube, of course, that the chat is happening at behance.net/live. So that's the chat that I'll be reading. So if you want to submit questions and things, that's where you want to be following. So what's up, Abdul, Paintab? Hope to see you over there. Giovas, Sandia, Dariwal, hello. Okay. All right. So let's go over to Premiere Pro. I'm going to minimize... Get these other things out of the way here. And we should be good to go. All right. Sweet. Okay. What's up, Jekyll and Hyde? Good to see you again. Alexandra, that voice. Oh, thank you. Robert Sullivan, good morning. Okay, so in order to really talk about formats, we have to first show and reveal all the various formats that Premiere sort of natively works with and supports. And there are lots of them. So just one of the easiest ways to kind of show all of those is let's go into the export dialog here. All right. Now, again, all of your different cameras, whether you're shooting with a mobile device, a phone, which, as I'm very honest about these days, almost all the video that I'm capturing is via the iPhone. I seldom take my DSLR around, and I'm no longer borrowing any Arri or Red cameras, so I'm shooting with the iPhone. So it's using, compressed footage, some flavor of H.264 or H.265, depending upon what app you're recording it in. Compressed footage, looks great, 4K, but something to consider. So if we go up to the top of the export settings menu here, this is going to reveal to you, of course, all the various formats. And not all of these are video specific. In the case of AAC audio, because of course the exporter allows you to export audio only if you so desired. AAC audio, that would be your standard. You'll all be familiar with those. That's kind of the standard for iTunes and Apple Music. AIFF, that is Apple's native uncompressed equivalent to the Windows PCM Wave, .wav, BWAV, all of those things. Identical. Essentially identical. AIFF has slightly different metadata capabilities than Wave. Both are uncompressed, all right? And we're going to talk about compressed versus uncompressed. You heard me mention H.264, MP4 as being compressed. Animated GIF, we all know what that is. Okay, so then we see Apple ProRes. All right, now that's one flavor of it, MXF-OP1A. DNxHR, DNxHD. So this is the native format leveraged in Avid workflows, and we have the native codec for DNxHR, DNxHD in Premiere Pro, both on Mac and Windows. Previously, years ago, we used to have, you were able to download, I think via the Avid site, a QuickTime wrapped DNX HD. They didn't even have DNX HR at the time. That isn't what people wanted. It was inefficient and slow. This is now the native codec from Avid. Works wonderfully. And this can be used as an editing format and also as a delivery format, all right? DPX, again, for those of you who work kind of in cinema workflows, right? This is DPX frame sequences, very high quality, really for very high-end delivery, very heavy media. You wouldn't want to be editing DPX sequences. I mean, you can, and you can certainly work with them in After Effects as well, but it's heavy media. It's full frame media, full bit depth. It's going to be a heavy load if you don't have a super powerful machine. Okay, H.264. All right, so that's kind of our web standard. So in terms of when you think about delivery, if you're going to YouTube or Vimeo or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, H.264 is, I would venture to say, I don't have a figure for you, it's probably 90+% of the content that's uploaded to all of those. Now, certain networks like Vimeo and Vimeo and YouTube will accept other formats, but the most commonly exported and uploaded one is H.264, and that's also what most of your mirrorless and DSLR and mobile devices will capture in, which is H.264. This is a compressed format, right? Smaller file sizes, but, you know, nice big delivery, whether in 1080 or 4K, but it's compressed. And there's different flavors of that too, all right? HEVC, H.265, so this was introduced again a couple of years ago. High efficiency video codec. The idea behind this one, it looks a little better than H.264, and it's a little bit smaller. I will also say, as the standards have really, they're continuing to kind of finalize, it's a little bit slower to export and it's a little bit less efficient for editing as well. A lot of your 360 cameras actually capture in HEVC for good reason, right? You're just capturing wider screen area, more pixels there. It's real good as a sort of capture format. I wouldn't probably choose it as an editing format. It too is also compressed, all right? And then we can kind of just skip some of these more classic, like MPEG-2. You know, this is what we used in the DVD days. MPEG-2 also, again, not unlike MP4. It's I would say, the much older brother of MP4 or of MPEG-4. You can edit with it. It works. It's just older, right? Not super efficient. MXF-OP1A, broadcast format, mainly for delivery, but again, can be edited with. And then QuickTime. And Raptor DCP, this is for cinema delivery, but QuickTime is an interesting one, right? Because QuickTime is really just, think of it as the wrapper for all different types of file formats that can exist in QuickTime, so in .mov files. So you can have QuickTime H.264, you can have QuickTime ProRes, obviously. You can have QuickTime H.265, you can have QuickTime DNX HD, right? As we talked about, that Avid format, that codec is still out there. Some more efficient than others. So the key here in talking about all of this is that there are a lot of formats. And if you just sort of shoot, as most do, and then you just start editing, and maybe the editing experience, it's not fast enough or it's not feeling right to you, it could be because you're just not using the best format possible or your system just isn't really optimized. We're going to focus today on format choices. Okay, so let's go back to the desktop here. Let me just go and check out the comments here real briefly. Very simple, says Alexander. All right. Sandhya, I'm a beginner trying to learn new things. You're in the right place. Very nice. All right. Robert Sullivan from Southern California. How are you doing? Okay. All right. Good. No major questions just yet. Love seeing that. Okay. So if I were to begin a project, now the footage that you're looking at here, this is this shot of San Francisco, which I've shown before. This is some 4K content. Again, you're seeing it squished. It's fit to the screen. If I went to 100%, that's actually showing you the actual frame size and dimensions of this. All right. On a very nice nice day in San Francisco. Not super sharp here, as I can see. All right. A little challenging there. I don't know where my point of focus was on this, but that's probably why I didn't use this shot. If I take a look at this, I'm going to right-click here and reveal this in the project. This is something that I will often do with my media, especially if I'm working with mixed media, is because, again, remember that your footage can have .mov, but as I just told you, it can be .mov, but be any number of different flavors of QuickTime Movie, right? It can be ProRes, it can be H.264, it can be whatever. So if I right-click on this and I go into Properties, all right, right-click, Control-click, Properties, this is now going to tell you sort of everything about this specific file. So again, as far as the actual type, it is an MPEG movie, right? So again, MPEG isn't gone. We're just not dealing with MPEG 2 anymore, right? Image size, so Ultra HD, 3840 by 2160. Frame rate, this always cracks me up a little because this came right off of the iPhone, shot natively in the iPhone. If I had shot this with Rush, this would be an even 30. iPhone, I tend to see a lot of, you see a lot of that 30.01. Video codec type, HEVC. And this 420 tells us that it's 8-bit footage. Remember that a lot of your DSLRs and mirrorless cameras now, via HDMI out, can give you a nice, clean, many do 420, still better than just, because, again, they'll record into something like ProRes or Cineform or DNxHR, 420, so you're using an uncompressed format with 8-bit, which is still going to be a little bit better than a compressed format with 8-bit. Many of them do 422, right? So again, you're going to have really all that latitude. That's just going to give you that much more detail in terms of, you know, how you're going to be able to color grade and really work with this footage because it's greater than 8-bit, okay? So this is an HEVC file. This is also variable frame rate, which I didn't realize in this case. What's cool about that, of course, is that now in Premiere Pro, something that we added a couple of versions ago, we now support variable frame rate playback quite nicely. There was a period where we did not, which was a real drag. Okay, so that's this particular piece of footage. Now let's look. You just saw that this Casio thing here. Let's bring this into our properties and see what this is. So this was shot with my Nikon D800. All right, so again, also MPEG movie because I wasn't using an external recorder, wasn't using something like an Atomos or something, just natively to the card. So this is an MPEG movie. All right, this is 1080p, 23976, 48K, square pixels, MP4/move. So this is, again, it's MPEG-4, you know, it's an MP4 in a sort of QuickTime movie container here, H.264 420 8-bit, okay? So what it doesn't tell you here, which I'm actually surprised, it doesn't tell you the bit rate of the H.264. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, not all of them are equal. If you look at the early like Canon 5D Mark II, which was really a breakthrough camera for DSLR shooting and bringing really full HD kind of to the masses of filmmakers and cinematographers. I want to say, I think the bitrate on that particular flavor of H.264 MP4 was like 10 megabits, which is okay. That's adequate. It's a little low. I believe the Nikon D800, starting with the D800 and the D4, recorded at, I want to say 24 megabit H.264. A little bit higher quality. Still compressed, but a little bit higher quality. Okay, so here's the thing about H.264, as I was saying. These are compressed file formats. So really, and you'll hear anybody who's being honest with you will tell you, look, most of the time I bring stuff in, I cut it quickly, I edit it. For me, the way to just ensure really good, smooth, fast performance is that if I don't want to transcode or don't want to create proxies for something, I'll go into my fractional playback. And again, if I'm really just cutting something together for story or just for, you know, for timing or whatever, I'll usually play or preview in quarter or eighth res, all right? Which on this 4K footage, when I hit play here, you know, it gets very pixelated and blocky. Now I have it set my pause resolution to full. So when I stop, you're seeing every pixel as it's meant to be seen, all right? So this is what like 1/8 res looks like if you're, you know, if you're playing back and cutting. Stop, it sharpens up. The difference though is that even with this compressed media, I can scrub through this super fast, super efficiently, real time. It works great. But again, at the cost of seeing it very blurry. Now you might be saying, well, can't you just do it at full? Yeah, probably. This is a pretty powerful iMac. It looks a little stuttery to me. The thing is, over time, as you start adding more and more layers of video and effects and other things, it is probably going to slow down because that H.264 content needs to be decoded in order to play back smoothly. All right. So it's not an ideal format for editing in. It just isn't, right? It's really meant to be a delivery format. It's not to say that you can't. I'm telling you right now, I edit in it 90% of the time. Unless we're dealing with 4K, because in that case, then I would probably go to proxies. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. So H.264, first point of today, not the best choice for editing, all right? Especially if you're on an underpowered system or, you know, like a laptop with kind of minimum specs for editing, say 4K. You know, if you've got a Core i7 laptop with like 16 gigs of RAM, I mean, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend full res cutting. I wouldn't recommend full res playback. You're just probably not going to see it unless it's just one clip. Then sure, right? No problem. You know, you can do that just fine. But as you really begin to edit, things might slow down a bit. All right. So in lieu of H.264, what would a good editing format be? Okay. Well, to kind of illustrate that, we're going to go back to our format menu here. Okay. All right. Jan Eric is asking, why can't most video editors take MKV files? Yeah, so we dropped our support for MKV a while ago. You know, largely for the same reason that you see a lot of kind of, one, it's an older format, very inefficient, done in the, MKV was, gosh, was that like the HDV days when that premiered? You know, not all formats live on forever. And in terms of efficiency, it's the complete opposite of efficiency. Now, there is a third-party plugin. Someone just asked me this on YouTube recently. There's a third-party plugin that still allows you to, I believe it supports MKV in Premiere. By the way, speaking of, and you see more MKV on the Windows side of things, so this brings up a good point about things like AVI files. Now, AVI files are, again, sort of the Windows equivalent of an uncompressed video file, right? If you ever export something in AVI, it's probably going to be super huge if it's, you know, if it's fairly long. It doesn't even have to be long. It's going to be a lot bigger than an H.264. Not super efficient for editing. I mean, it's okay, but they're heavy. AVI is an old format. It's not the most ideal. Again, on a really powerful system, maybe you don't see a difference. But in general, that's not something that I recommend. All right. So talking about editing formats. Okay. So let's first go to QuickTime. Now, this is just where I can show all of them to you, which is why I'm using this menu, okay? So when I choose QuickTime for the format here, I'm going to go into the video codec menu because as I told you, inside of this menu, you're going to see a whole bunch of different formats that are supported via QuickTime, okay? So first and foremost, you have Apple ProRes. Now, the amazing thing about ProRes is that one, it's an industry standard. Two, as of several versions ago, you now have the ability to leverage ProRes both for import and export on Mac and Windows. So yes, even on Windows in Premiere Pro, you can import ProRes content, you can export ProRes content, you can convert to ProRes even on a Windows-based system. This is really wonderful. And ProRes itself has multiple flavors. So ProRes 422, kind of the original classic, 422 HQ. This is kind of my chosen format. For most things, if I need to deliver kind of a, you know, a pseudo sort of, you know, an uncompressed master in best quality or almost best quality, I'll typically do 422 HQ. If I do screen capture, I will actually record it and then save it out as 422 HQ. That prevents you getting a lot of the pixelation and blockiness that you'll often see if you do screen caps, again, saved out as even ProRes 422, but especially as like MP4 for your master file. You're gonna have banding and pixelation. 422 HQ is gonna look great. 422 LT, it's a lighter version, all right? And 422 proxy, meant to be smaller, lighter, lower quality, but super fast and efficient for editing. You can use it as a proxy, or you could use it just as an intermediate format and then relink to master media later, all right? And then 444 is, you know, sort of the best version of ProRes minus ProRes RAW. We won't go there today. And this is, again, you know, full color support, wonderful, but heavy, right? Can you edit in 444? Yes. Is it going to be efficient? It's okay. It's just heavy, and more so than heavy, your file sizes are just going to be massive. So here's the thing, when you're thinking about, do I bother converting? If you're already having decent performance, you don't need to change your editing format, all right? So a common misconception, and this is something too, when people are editing, and especially if you're working in 8-bit color, and I'm not going to go into a whole color description. We talked about this in some of the early master classes. Think of bit depth with color for video the same as it is for images, right? 8-bit color video think of it as a JPEG. And anything greater than that, 10, 12, 14, think of it as like your DNG, your raw media. It's not that, it's just necessarily, but it's greater than 8-bit, right? So you're gonna have more latitude for grading, better quality, less degradation over time. It's just better. If you capture something at 8-bit in a compressed file format, as I said, if you're already having good playback, scrubbable performance, you don't need to change it. There's a misconception that, oh, if I want to leverage 32-bit color effects like the Lumetri color, I need to get my media into a 32-bit color space format, something like ProRes 444 or 422HQ, and that's incorrect. Here's the thing, if you capture it at 8-bit, whatever limitations in your camera were there, and because it's 8-bit, once that stuff is through the sensor, it's gone. So by converting it to something like ProRes, you're not buying any more bits. I mean, the file format itself has them, but you didn't capture with them. So it can't recreate them. Now, the benefit of doing that, if you're going to be doing lots of iterations, is that if you convert to something like ProRes 422HQ, there's no degradation, there's no loss, okay? So your ProRes is theoretically visually identical to the H.264 or the MP4. I told you this was going to be super nerdy. And if you're going to be like doing edits and like, editing down to something else, exporting and then saving out, if you keep kind of saving to 422, again, in theory, you're not really degrading the media. Just like if you, resave DNGs. But if you keep saving a JPEG over a JPEG over a JPEG, what happens? It starts to get soft, starts to just have artifacts. Well, if you work in MP4, H.264, and you export H.264, and then you take that export and you do something else to it and you export it again, that's like a copy of a copy of a copy, right? There's loss, there's degradation, your media suffers. So if you're not having issues with playback, you can work off of your native editing formats. If you are, you can convert to something like ProRes 422HQ, or you don't even have to go that high. You could do LT, and then you could always export the media by relinking it to your native media if you so desire. So these are pretty common. Now, I talked about, again, DNxHR, DNxHD via QuickTime. Don't use that one. We have native DNx, native Avid format for that if you wanted to use that. That's a very common format. Works really well, plays back really well. That'll create a .mxf file for you. When I was working with a lot of VR a couple of years ago, I would convert all of those. There's a perfect example of, like, I have the Gear 360. It's already an old VR camera, Samsung. And it captures H.265. When you stitch the 360 media, what it creates is an H.264. That was what was that? That was a 4K. So a 4K 360 H.264. I mean, the playback performance was not spectacular at full quality. Then we got some footage that was 6K, and then some 8K VR in H.264. Absolute nightmare to edit. On the most powerful PC, it was still a nightmare because, again, it's having to decode that H.264. Blah. Unideal. Less than ideal. So for that, I actually used native Avid DNx, and it was just magical. Or MXF OP1A, okay? But don't use this one here. And then the other format flavor that you have here is GoPro Cineform. Is that coming through? Yeah, you can see it. So this was for ages. This was known as the intermediate codec of choice. So again, in a world where we're capturing on lots of different devices and you might have different frame sizes, there's certainly different formats or different frame rates, people would convert everything to Cineform. It's optimized for playback. It's optimized for export. It's an amazing format. It looks great. It is, again, the equivalent of like a 422HQ or 444 or DNxHR. However, file sizes are large, right? So that's the other thing to consider. If you're going to change your editing format to something like Cineform, ProRes, or DNX, your files are going to be pretty massive, all right? I mean, H.264, the benefit is those files are, small-ish. So there's a lot of things to consider, but it's all based on whether or not you're having good performance or bad performance while editing. All right, here, and just to show you, if we go to the native MXF OP1A, DNX HD, DNX HR, again, this is Avid's codec. If you go into the video codec drop down here, oh, we've actually minimized this. This used to be a list that was like a page long. It's actually we've trimmed it down quite a bit. Okay, but you can see here various flavors, right? So again, if you wanted to work as in an intermediate RGB 444 10-bit, I mean that's pretty heavy, and that file is just going to be massive. It's going to be massive, I think for the stuff that I was doing with the VR stuff, we used like an SQ 8-bit just for that intermediate codec, and then relinked it to the native media before rendering. So again, these can all be great to edit in if you're having playback and performance issues, but they're not compressed like H.264 or H.265. And in particular, H.265, which is smaller. So you're going to have big media living on your drives, big files that you're dealing with. And, and then you could run into performance issues because of drive space and disk speed and other things, right? My whole array here is pretty much SSD, and all the editing drives are SSD. So I don't worry about speed and access and asynchronous access. But if you've got, older kind of filled up 7200 RPM spinning drives, really heavy media could cause you some issues there too. Okay. Akin is saying people usually insert their prototype MP4 videos into their artboards as a presentation file in AE. Makes sense, right? I mean, sure, there's absolutely. And that's the thing. And don't misunderstand me. There's nothing I told you. I use it. I use H.264. I use MP4 almost all the time. However, in certain things that I was cutting, like this little music documentary, there was just a lot of media, and I wanted to be able to view it at full 1080 at all the time. And I had lots of clips in the timeline and so much MP4, the playback was bad. I converted everything to ProRes, playback was good, okay? So let's talk about converting or transcoding media for editing purposes. This is not necessarily making proxies, okay? This is, you know what? I'm gonna take that H.264, we're gonna archive those, we're gonna make ProRes 422 HQ. That's what we're gonna edit from. I'm never gonna relink back because the HQ is, again, identical quality-wise, albeit with a larger container for more bits, as the H.264 MP4 media. So to do like a mass transcode, just like we do in Lightroom, right? You don't bring in your raw Sony files or your CR2 files or NEF files. You can, but you should preferably convert them to something like DNG. You would do that in the video apps with the application called Prelude. So Adobe Prelude is an application to transcode, convert your media, do what we call partial ingests. So if you have a really long clip with a bunch of takes and there's only like a small piece of that you want to, again, you have this really long MP4 file, but there's 10 seconds in the middle. That's the piece that you need. You can make a selection of those 10 seconds and create a ProRes version of that or a DNX version of that. So this is Prelude here. I've already got some of this content in there. Let's double click inside the project bin here, which takes us into the ingest dialog. And I'm not even sure what media this is looking for, but let's go and find my favorite Moog media here, okay? So we're just kind of navigating here. Moog media, okay. Here it comes. All right, you can see I've already made some proxies for this separately. All right. I'm looking here at your questions. Okay, I'll let you all summarize those differences so that we don't derail too much. Okay, very good. All right, so I want to make new versions of this content in ProRes 422 HQ. All right. So here we have all my various shots. And just like the media browser in Premiere, right? I've got hover scrubbing. I can click inside. I can drag my scrubber here. All right. If I use I and O, I can set my in and out points. And this would be a case where we're creating, again, what's called the partial ingest. So I only want these, 5 seconds right here. I don't need all of this because this is me messing around with, the focus ring and everything else. I just want this piece. I could do that. If I select that, now just that piece will be created. All right. So this is a really useful way to do this on a large scale. Or if you just want all the clips and all their duration, with all the duration, all the media in them, you can just say check all. Okay. Real simply. All right. So this is a pretty short one. Let's do this. This is pretty short. That's pretty short. All right. And then this is pretty small too. And then maybe we'll do one little partial on this one. All right. Set it in here. All handheld. Not my best handheld work. Okay. So up at the top here, we now have the transfer and transcode section. All right. So primary destination. Okay. So again, because I'm creating new media, right? It's asking me, well, where do I want this to go? Okay. So I'm going to actually just choose a new location. Let's place it on the desktop. We'll call this temp ProRes for stream, which will just remind me to dump this later. All right. We can add subfolders if we want. So again, maybe you have different media that you want pre-categorized. You can do all of that. Transcode. Okay. Now, just by happenstance, this is probably the last format that I used. QuickTime came up, ProRes 422 HQ, because as I said, that's kind of my go-to for an intermediate format. All right. Now, here's something interesting too. If you have clips that were shot and your camera, after either a specific period of time, or sometimes it's file side, cuts and then goes to a new clip. This was something we added again a few versions ago. This can automatically restitch together as one so that it's seamless if you're doing that sort of thing. Okay. And that's it, right? You choose your codec, choose the format, and we're good. Now, the other thing that you can do, you notice here, you can also create multiple destinations. So why would you do that? And you have the option, if you choose multiple destinations, to do different formats. And look here, DNxHR, match source. Oh, interesting. This allows you to say, make new versions of your media, right? Your editing format, which could be something like this. And maybe you're also going to make your proxies. So maybe I would do something like, what was the one I was saying before? DNX. We could do like one of these 1080p HQs, something like that. Or again, just do match source. Maybe we do a ProRes proxy. So we want to make proxy files separately. I'm going to show you an integrated way to do that. It's the idea that people will often create multiple versions of media for different purposes. Some for editing, some for post, some for handing off to the After Effects motion designer, just so that they have reference, right? They don't need the 4 gig file or the 20 gig file. They just need a small one, but that's still good enough quality-wise. That's where I'd use like, a small ProRes, like an LT or a proxy, or an SQ or an 8-bit DNX, or, GoPro Cineform, okay? Which again, you should also see in that list here. And you see for GoPro Cineform, you have a couple different options too. RGB 12-bit with alpha, maximum bit depth. Yeah, this is like the king format right here. It's wonderful. Huge files. All right. Huge files. It's going to look amazing, but really big files. All right. More of a delivery format, right, for my money, although you can certainly edit it with it. Okay. So we're just going to do the one destination. Now, the other thing that you can do here, again, which is great on a mass scale, is that you can add metadata. So if you want to have specific metadata already embedded in all of your media, and I think I did it for some of these clips. I don't know if any of this stuff is saved in here. Oh yeah, so here, look, I've got some presets that I already created. So this was like Arizona studio footage. I had this stuff that I shot years ago in this really awesome auto shop in Finland. So if I choose that, this was a preset that I made, so it just had, you know, a location metadata field, an interior field. So some was studio, some was office, some was shop. All right. And then the content, I would vary this. All of this at the time was gear, vinyl, turntable. So I just put this metadata in there. All right. Similarly, if I go to, you know, Finland, see what we got here. Right. So here I added, and I don't necessarily need year. That's already kind of contained natively in the camera metadata, but why not? Lighting, kind of a nice thing to have. Interior, location. All right. So you can add custom metadata to multiple files. You can also do group renaming, which is something that I get asked all the time. And look here, I made a preset for the Finland one. And for that, I'm using the file name with some custom text. So the file name, they're all FN, custom text underscore DSLR underscore, and then I asked it to use the ingest time to append that to the end. So it would look something like that. Okay. All right. So I get asked about batch renaming all the time because a lot of times you do want to do that. You don't want everything to be underscore DSC 3343. Maybe you want it to be more specific. So on a global scale, you can do batch renaming right here. Some people used to use Bridge for this. If you're working with video, Prelude is the way to go. All right. Very quiet in the chat right now. Lots of people here, very quiet in the chat. Are you watching in awe or going, yeah, this is something I'll never do? Possible. Okay. Let's go and hit ingest. All right. So what happens, or what should happen, it launches Media Encoder in the background if it's not already running. And then it's going to start transcoding your media. Okay. Now, again, how long does it take? Well, how much footage do you have? What's the frame size? What's the frame rate? Did you do partial ingest? You know, lots of things to consider here. As you can see, though, it's going through pretty quickly. When you're converting to something like ProRes, it's not compressed. So again, it doesn't have to do, it's just passing that media straight through real quickly. I mean, this is like, you know, it's just too easy. All right. So it's creating our intermediate ProRes media right now. Very nice. I'll just let it finish rendering. While it's doing that, okay, let me get out of subclips here. What you're seeing is that, is that it's bringing in all of that media. In fact, it's already done, right? It just brought in all this media. Really nice, okay? So now in my Prelude project, I have access to all of that media along with all this other stuff. Oh, so there's some of the Finland shots that I did. Okay. So all of this native media was in here. And it looks like some, you can see some I had custom names. Some already was in this project. Okay. All right. So take a look at this. Here we go. Nice. All right. Fast, beautiful. Again, looks the same quality as the previous one because we don't lose anything going from H.264 to ProRes. We're not gaining anything. We're not bringing back. It's not suddenly 10-bit because we're in a 10-bit container, 12-bit container. We can't gain anything back. But when you apply color corrections, it is going to look a little bit better and it'll hold up a little bit better if you're doing multiple iterations on things than like a native H.264. Having said that, grading an H.264 in a timeline and grading a ProRes of the same media, I mean, ultimately, no real difference. You don't need to convert to be able to leverage greater than 8-bit because Premiere Pro is always working in a 32-bit float container, okay? So if you are using Prelude and you transcode your media like this, you do have the ability to send a clip directly to Premiere. So I could actually take this, send it over to Premiere Pro just like that. All right. It jumps right. I mean, it's instantaneous, real nice and easy. All right. Go into our properties here. And now when I look at the properties, you can see there's more data on this file. So it's going to show you the new file size, image size, frame rate, all this stuff's the same. All right. It's telling you some details about QuickTime. all right? And then you can see here as we get towards the bottom, compressor, Apple ProRes 422HQ, quality, highest quality. Okay, and that's telling you about the audio, etc. All right. So again, I could take this clip, new sequence if I want. Now this is the 422HQ. If I really wanted to make it kind of leaner, it's fine. But I mean, even as I'm scrubbing through this, it's just fast and zippy, even in full, and it just works wonderfully. Okay. Hard to see that sometimes with something like H.264, MP4, H.265. Someone asked me the other day, about like 3GP or Flash video. I mean, again, super heavily compressed formats, which we used to import natively. If you're going to be working with those, one, you can't import them natively anymore anyway, but you'd want to convert them because they were never meant to be editing formats. They were delivery formats, right? On the early days of phone video, 3GP, which looked horrible, it was super, like ridiculously compressed, Not an ideal codec for doing that. Okay. All right, taking it all in, says Steve. Hughes, we are listening. Clever, lurking. Tim, nice. Fuser, yes. Again, many things going on. People trying to consume data. All right, thank you for that. Casairo, Cumberbatch, what if you are exporting an animation for different destinations? Okay, so we're going to get to destinations in a second here, but actually that does speak to, speaking of animation, another codec, another flavor, which is not good for editing, all right? So I'm not even sure if we're going to see it in here now that I said that. Is it still available in there? No, we took it out of here. Let me see if it's on the Premiere side. So what I'm getting at is Apple Animation. Now that's also, I can't remember if that as part of QuickTime has been modified for 32-bit or not. I don't remember. But Apple Animation, again, uncompressed, excellent quality, super massive file sizes, super heavy, okay? Really heavy media. Not something I would typically recommend using, all right? It doesn't look like we even have it in, did we add all these stock presets? Oh, that's cool. Seeing things that I haven't seen in here for a while. Oh, it is in Premiere. Okay. So Apple Animation, some people used to use this as a working format back in the day when machines were really slow. Do not use this as an editing format. I would even say don't really use this as an export format, although some places, I've seen some shops that still do it. It's just hard for some systems, especially older systems, to play back, especially if you're in greater than 1080. It's just heavy. So I wouldn't recommend using that. Now, what you're asking, exporting animation for different destinations, what are those destinations? So like YouTube, Vimeo, all those. Again, high bit rate, and we have specific presets for that, right? So both here in Media Encoder and After Effects. If I'm going to YouTube and I want to deliver, 4K, I can use H.264. And if you take a look down at the attributes here, I believe it's like a 40 megabit stream. Yeah. So it's using a VBR1 pass at 40 megabits. That's legit. I mean, it's going to look great on YouTube. YouTube, I also believe, now allows you to, I think you can upload ProRes, and I think you can upload MXF. I'm not sure. Because there might be somebody out there who's going, but the color is slightly, or the sound is slightly. Maybe, I mean, who's viewing this? So you just have to determine where it's going and, what you want to do with that. I think YouTube now also supports H.265 uploads, slightly better quality, certainly for animation, text animation, motion blur. This can be real nice. Again, you've got a 4K UHD export, 8K, 1080, 720, and then some standard def presets here. Your file sizes will vary, right? It's gonna change from format to format, and again, just depending upon how you're exporting. So, and here's like a good example all right, of just difference in file size. So the H.264 4K using the YouTube preset, estimated file size 56 megs. If we go back to the H.265 4K, 49. So not a significant file size savings, but it's 7 megs smaller, and quality-wise, it does look a little better. It looks a little sharper, the color is a little more saturated as you know, it's going to look pretty good. So it just depends. You have to know where it's going and what file formats are supported there. Now, again, if you're delivering your animation, you know, for Sony cinemas, you probably want to do something like a DCP export. Or again, maybe someone's going to be taking that and reworking on it in After Effects, or maybe doing something in Premiere and they want, you know, a more flexible sort of frame sequence format. DPX. DPX kind of a standard for cinematic delivery for a really long time. Okay, I'm checking on our time here. Okay, we only have 9 minutes. Amazing how time flies here. Okay, so again, I hope that answered your question. Yes, YouTube, cinema, Netflix. So now again, Netflix has really specific, very specific file format requirements. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the format they want. It could be a ProRes, it could be an MXF, I don't remember. But Netflix in particular has very specific requirements, audio channelization, you know, frame size, bit depth, all of those kinds of things. So you'd have to look specifically. YouTube, I just told you, and cinema, I just told you. All right. And that, by the way, that's another good thing to point out too. We're talking about video codec and video settings. If you go into the audio tab for something like ProRes, so you not only have obviously multiple bit depths. So if you're working in 24-bit, keep it in 24-bit. If it's all 16-bit audio, keep it in 16, right? And then for channels, again, based on it depends on the format that you're working in. Some formats will give you, 8-channel, 16-channel, 24-channel, whatever it is. Here, this particular one is only offering us mono and 2-channel. Let's see if we go to something like the DNX. Let's see one of these. I'll just see. I don't know about this, but let's see if it has different audio. Yeah, here we go. So in this particular flavor of DNX, we can have up to 32 channels of audio. So again, this is where Netflix in particular, very specific. And I think they also require 5.1 as part of your audio soundtrack. Don't quote me on that. So then you have to set it up as 6-channel. And, and then you have to also, again, this in MXF, it doesn't have you can't adjust the channelization. In some ProRes flavors, you can. So different considerations for wherever it's going. Okay. Tim Barnett, do you have any recommendations on export settings for users who work with mobile capture, such as iPhone 11 and Google Pixel? Yeah, so this is exactly what I've been saying and what I recommend. You can choose what you want. If it doesn't look good to you, you can change it. So if you're working with, now we're kind of segueing to export features here. If you're going with YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, Facebook, first and foremost, I highly recommend using the presets that we have. Why? Because we worked very closely with Facebook, with Twitter, with Vimeo, and YouTube to create presets that kind of meet their ideal standard. And this is not a rule. This is a rule that I use every time. Every video that I upload to YouTube, mostly 1080p, it's that preset right there. And most of it's shot on the iPhone. Okay. Now, having said that, if you're going to upload something like, again, to Adobe Stock, we have, and there's different considerations there. Maybe you're shooting 4K on the iPhone, then you want to use one of these presets because they're going to be much higher bit depth, significantly better quality, bigger, but again, at Adobe Stock doesn't matter. People want the best quality imagery. Go with these presets. So I would start there. I would start with those specific presets. And again, for mobile media, that's the way to do it. Now, the other nice thing is we do have like these are generic mobile device presets. Let me see what this even is, the attributes of this one here. Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit lower than the YouTube preset, 32 megabits versus, and again, that's pretty high for a mobile device. You wouldn't necessarily want to play that back on a phone, although you could, all right? It's H.264. The phone should be able to handle it nicely, all right? But for the social networks, as I mentioned, go with these presets. They're the best choice. And if you don't like them, you could try one of the match source options here. Adaptive or just, constant. All right. And Google Pixel and iPhone content, I mean, it just looks great. Okay. So just talked a little bit about editing formats, delivery formats, okay? Really kind of reiterating all the things I said before. I can show you these in Prelude as well. If you're going to deliver something, you want the best quality, ProRes 422 HQ, ProRes 444, if you require alpha channel. By the way, and this is another reason why a lot of times, if you're working with content, video content that you're doing compositing with green screen and After Effects, and you need to preserve the alpha channel, right? So you want to send me that media with the alpha channel preserved. None of these other flavors up here of 422 have the alpha channel. So in that case, I have to work with 444 with alpha. But it looks great. It still plays really well on an optimized system. That's something to consider. Similarly, again, there are two flavors of Cineform that have alpha here. So maybe if this one's too heavy for your system, try the Cineform. The performance differences they vary. So you might get better playback with Cineform, right? As far as export's concerned, it doesn't matter. You're going to go ProRes 444, and I would choose this top one here, maximum bit depth for delivery in Cineform. All right. Talked about like cinematic exports. Again, for that, you would use something like DPX, or as I showed in Premiere before, Raptor DCP. There's also additional DCP presets that you can find online, and that's specifically for like digital cinema projection. DCP is largely becoming a standard for like cinematic export. All right. Cool. All right. I see Craig is saying, so you exported as QuickTime animation, right? Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing is QuickTime, there's nothing wrong with QuickTime animation. I mean, again, quality-wise, it's beautiful. It's just, it's an old, super heavy format. So if that's your final format that you're delivering, I mean, someone might go, hey, dude, it's not playing really well. That could be the case. Quality-wise, it's beautiful, all right? So I just typically don't recommend people use animation just because it's heavy. We actually had graphics in Wirecast for a while that were exported as animation. And, when you've got a streaming system, which is multicasting to different networks and playing real-time graphics while controlling multiple cameras and multiple input devices, now I go to play back a 2K or 4K video on top of all of that. This is all running off of a MacBook Pro. It was stuttery because it was just so many system resources required to play that animation codec. So nothing wrong with it. And by the way, Craig, really common in the visual effects world. People still use it. It's just not the most optimized. For a final delivery, okay, but for like intermediate, if you're going back and forth, I would go with something like a 444 with alpha over animation any day. All right. Nice. Okay. So last thing I'm going to show you here, we've got 2 more minutes, is what if you don't want to convert your media, but you just want something lighter to work with while you're in Premiere, while you're importing stuff. Okay, so for that, we can do what's called create proxies. And I'm going to show you this real quickly. By the way, you can find a separate video, a separate stream that I did on proxy creation on my YouTube channel, which is Jason Levine Video. And if you hit me up on Behance or on YouTube or Twitter Periscope, I can send you direct links to that. Proxies are smaller, lightweight versions of your files that would be created the moment you import footage. So essentially, we're going to choose create proxies for our ingest method. We're then going to choose a preset that conforms to our frame size. So again, we offer H.264 proxies. I would not recommend using those. I don't know actually why we have them in there. It's not a good choice for proxy. It works. It's just not the best choice. This is 1080, so I would go with something like a 720p Apple ProRes proxy. Proxy destination, same as project, okay? Or wherever you want it to go. You can choose some other location and click OK. So now what happens when I bring in a piece of content, like this. I'm going to click import. The moment I import it, I can start editing this. I'm going to go into a new sequence. However, what's happening in the background, you can probably see this in Media Encoder. Oh, it already did it. Look, proxy, done. It just made a smaller, lighter weight version of that file. So if I have my proxy button enabled, which is this one right here, I need to drag it down into my button editor. When I click on this and it's blue, I'm now using the lighter, smaller version of that media. So it really just means that I can scrub and play back in full quality without issue. If I then want to do color correction, I want to be using the native media. I can uncheck this, and when it's gray like that, now I'm looking at the native media. It's that simple. I could get into a whole thing about this, but unfortunately, friends, we don't have the time, and I need to say goodbye. So until next time, thank you so much for joining. You will, of course, be able to watch the replay right here on Behance. Coming up next, we've got the XD Creative Challenge. So have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you again for posting that link, and we will see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.